I am going to launch into this program today, which is optimizing Social Security, the basics and beyond. And I want to kind of give you a lay of the land of what Social Security means really to me. You know, as an advisor to people, I can tell you it's an extraordinarily important program for our society, and it makes a huge impact in many people's lives around the country. So I'm a massive fan of Social Security. This is an infographic that will give you a sense of really what we're dealing with as a country in terms of the scale and size of Social Security. We have about $1 trillion flowing in every year into the Social Security system through contributions from workers. The number of workers is something in the range of 175 million workers are paying into the Social Security system every year. It flows through the trust fund, the Social Security Trust Fund, and about $1 trillion now is flowing out to beneficiaries. And we're talking about around 65 million beneficiaries and growing every day. So we all know the demographic shifts that are occurring in our society. We have people reaching retirement age. I think the statistic is something like 10,000 a week are reaching that age. So the system is a massive element of our overall budget. I think the overall budget for the federal government is something in the range of $3.5 trillion. So you can get a sense of how much $1 trillion really means to our government. But it's a flowing through system. Money flows in, money flows out. Workers are supporting retirees, and that is a perpetual system. So most times people would say, sometimes I pontificate, so I'll just do it. People say, you know, this is the Ponzi scheme. You know, there's people supporting the beneficiaries, and that'll come to an end someday, and the whole thing will collapse. You know, a Ponzi scheme that has an element of a perpetuity, a foreverness, isn't really a Ponzi scheme. The collapse happens when you cut the system off. That's when things collapse. Well, this system is designed from a demographic perspective to always have entrants coming into the system along with beneficiaries. And so our job is to fund it properly. Our job is to design it properly and be committed to what this actually is. And it is social insurance. It's providing insurance in the event that you don't have the life that you imagined in terms of your work life. Things can go wrong. We all know people who've had things go wrong. Doesn't mean that they're failures in life. It means that things didn't work out financially for them. Social Security is designed for us as a society to know that we have a safety net for everybody. And if you just go back in time, 100 years before Social Security really became a thing, there was massive poverty among the elderly. And I think we've developed and evolved as a society to know that that's something that we don't accept. And it's not just us. It's a worldwide, first world kind of decision that we make sure that we take care of everybody to some degree. So you've been paying into this system. I don't like the word entitlement because people have tried to make that seem like a negative thing. That it's an entitlement program, as if somehow it's a handout. It's not a handout. You've been putting money in the system your entire life. It's been a growing amount into the system as time has gone on. You can see there's multiple levels of, if you look on your pay stub, it says FICA, Medicare and Social Security. The Social Security part is 12.4% now, and that's been a growing level over the years as the program has been altered, shifted, changed to make sure that it works. The biggest changes took place in 1983 when Alan Greenspan had a commission. He was named the chairman of the commission, and his job was to make sure he shored up the financial structure of Social Security for the long term. And part of it was to push the retirement age out about a year, depending on your year of birth, which I'll show you, but also to increase the funding mechanism to push the payroll tax up to 12.4%. You've paid half of it as the employee, and your employer has paid the other half. But I always say every year I give this talk, don't forget, that's all your money. Because if your employer was not required to pay it, you very well likely would have negotiated having that increased pay of 6.2% as well. So it's all us. We're putting in 12.4% into the system, and it's designed to pay out benefits to you and to everybody else. But it has been a growing number. Let me talk to you about the dependency of Social Security in many people's lives. First off, 33% of, for all retirees, Social Security represents about a third of their income. So that's looking at the great pool of 65 million people. On average, it represents about a third of their retirement income. So that's a big number. But if you start looking at the breakdown of people, half of all married people collecting Social Security and 70% of singles, it represents half of their income. Half of the retirement income for those large chunks of married and single cohorts. And if you shift it even further, a quarter of all married people and 50% of all singles, it represents 90% of their income. So this is a system that takes care of those with lesser means, lesser income to a very large degree. It's designed to be that way. It's what you would describe as a progressive system. Those with the least income and least history of earnings, work history, they're going to get the biggest replacement. Those with the highest earnings in their life, Social Security is designed to give them less replacement. So it's skewed to the poor. And that's exactly what insurance would be, because you weren't born, this is now again giving an opinion, but you weren't born wealthy. You weren't born educated. You weren't born successful. You worked at that, life worked out in that, but you never had a guarantee that was going to happen to you. So social insurance is designed to make sure that if you trip and fall, if you have something happen in your life where you're no longer able to earn that kind of living, Social Security will help fill the gap so that you won't live in poverty. How does it get calculated? I kind of like to explain this to people because it's important to know what your benefit's based on. Essentially, what the Social Security system does is it looks at your work history, and it takes the 35 best years of your life, and it adjusts every single one of those years to put them all on equal footing in terms of inflation. So that job you had in 1982 is inflated to today's dollars, along with 5 years ago's earnings inflated to today's dollars. So everything is all inflation adjusted. It looks at your entire work history, all the years, and it throws away the worst ones, and it keeps the 35 best ones. And then it averages it. So you can see in this depiction, these orange lines are the lowest of the 35 years of this example, and they're thrown out. And all the blue ones are the remaining 35 years. And so you think about all those years, when you start working at age 18, and you work all the way to 65, we're talking about well over 35 years. I'll do the quick math on that. 25, 65 is 40 years. So, you've got about 47 years worth of work there. So you get to throw out quite a number of years, and you get to leave behind the best 35 of your life. And you, after 10 years of working, you're entitled to Social Security. So that's the eligibility, 10 years, and then you're in the system. This capped thing that I have on this graphic, this circle, I want everyone to know that you might have a blowout year, a year where you made $500,000 a year. Well, if you had that, congratulations to you. The Social Security system only is taking a contribution on the first $130-something thousand currently. All your earnings above that, there's no Social Security tax being collected, and there's no benefit. They're not averaging in that $500,000 into your lifetime average. They're capping it out at $130,000. So you could have a really high-paying job that you average $200,000 a year. Your benefit's based off of the maximum $130,000, and your taxes that were collected were based on the maximum $130,000. There are politicians out there who, as we look forward and look at the projections of Social Security, the actuarial studies indicate that there will be a shortfall of money flowing in and flowing out plus the draining of the Social Security Trust Fund by about 2032, at which point, if we do nothing between now and then, there would have to be a cut in the benefit by about 25% for it to be inflow and outflow to be equal. So Congress has work to do. What they did back in 1983, they're probably going to have to do it pretty darn soon and make adjustments. One of the adjustments is to take that cap and push it higher. So they'll start collecting taxes on more of people's income. The question then, as a former actuary, the question then becomes, what about the benefit? Because if you're going to collect more in taxes on higher earnings, are you going to include those higher earnings in the benefit calculation? And at some point, if you don't provide additional benefits for additional taxation, you could get in a situation where a person who has a high earner starts to think about it and says, I think that I'm getting less than what I put in. And that's going to be a politically charged realization. But it is a realization that's going to become clearer and clearer to people, and we're going to have to make decisions as a society. What is it for? So that's why I always stress the social insurance aspect of it, that ultimately some things in life turn out that you may not utilize a benefit as much as somebody else. You may not drive on a road as much as somebody else, but we still all have common roads that we can utilize when the time comes. Same thing with having a fire department, for example. You know, to complain about not having a fire is not something that people usually do, but we all pay taxes for a fire department. So this is the work history, 35 years, and this is a graphic that kind of indicates to you what that wage replacement calculation really is. For people who are making, on average, $30,000 a year in their lifetime, Social Security will represent half of that as a replacement. As you took this graphic lower and lower in earnings, you'd see that number continue to skyrocket up. And as you make more and more, Social Security begins to plateau at a 20% replacement or close to it. So it is definitely a progressive system by design. And kind of giving you an idea now of I thought this was an interesting graphic, is that the retirement age for people, this kind of gives you an idea of where people retire and at what age they retire. You can see that half of all people retire in that 61 to 65 range. Some people retire early at about 13%, similar to 66 to 69. And then people retire after the age of 70 at a pretty low rate. And this is interesting from the concept of how Social Security pays its benefits as you decide when you're going to retire. And I wanted to kind of give you an idea of the rarefied air that exists for people who are retiring at age 70. Because I tend to talk about it a lot, but as I looked at this graphic, I realized I'm talking to a very small minority of people. Full retirement age. I mentioned this earlier. The full retirement age has been changing ever so slowly over quite a long time. And I just want to kind of point out for you that this big chunk of people born between 1943 and 1954, their retirement age is age 66. And I would venture to guess that the vast majority of this audience fall into that range, age 66. But as you see the next year, 1955, and every year thereafter, the Social Security retirement age, the full retirement age, increases by 2 months to 66 and 2 months, 66 and 4 months, 66 and 6 months, all the way up to age 67, and then that's my generation's full retirement age. And then it stopped at 67. So we all should be prepared that the next set of reforms is very likely to try to push up that retirement age for a generation younger than mine, up to 68, 69, 70 years old. Just to give you a thought exercise or some sort of a counterpoint to that, I would tell you that sounds fine for a guy like me. I sit around at a desk most of the time pushing paper, reading my iPad. It's not really that hard. But there are a lot of people that tend to be maybe even on the lower wage scale who do very, very physical jobs. And those physical jobs may not allow them to work and work and work and work until age 70. So I think it's a discriminatory solution to simply say we should increase the retirement age. That would only be a solution that someone who sits around pushing paper would think. So I think we should be really careful about how we do it. My suggestion to nobody is that we do something similar to the way that workers' comp may be priced, where you actually rate a job based on the physicality of it, the danger of it, the wearing down of the body. And you have people who choose to have years working out in the field with a hard hat, actually hammering and putting together homes, for example, or building roads. Maybe they have a full retirement age that it's lower than people like me. Maybe I should be retiring at 72 as a full retirement age within Social Security and allow others to retire at 62 or 64. So I think we should definitely do a job-rated full retirement age, and I think that would help make that fairer, and it may actually entice people to say, I'd like to do some job where I actually am outside working with my body, and this might be one incentive to actually shift our economy away from just simply paper pushing. Although I love paper pushing, I just want you to know. So age 67 for my generation and beyond, but for this group, 66 is the full retirement age. It has implications, as you know. You can collect Social Security at much younger ages than 66. You can start collecting as early as age 62. But if you do, you will take a significant cut in your lifetime payout from Social Security. It's somewhere in the range of 25 to 30%. That's the reduction if you collect at age 62. Every year that you delay, you can basically tack on an 8% increase in your benefit. And you can do that 8% increase all the way to age 70, at which point that's as much as you're going to get. It's called delayed retirement credits. And it has a massive impact in the difference between a 62-year-old beneficiary and that same person going at age 70. It's something like 75% higher over that whole span of 8 years. Significant difference. So age 66 is sort of a arbitrary line that says that's your full retirement age, because basically the reductions counted from there and the increases counted from there. But frankly, it's just a stair-step process. As early as age 62, as high as age 70, 8% per year increase. And we'll talk a little bit about the math behind that and how you should think about that decision as I go along. I found this, at first I found it fascinating, but then I thought about it over the years. It's just logical. The humans are humans. Age 62, about a third, about 35% of the people choose to start collecting Social Security at the earliest possible age. And I think the logic behind it probably is multifaceted. One is just pure finance. They look at their financial situation and they see that they can collect the benefit and they need it. And you can kind of see, as you looked at the dependency figures that I showed you in the beginning, that's a lot of people. So they're not doing complex math. They're just simply saying, I need it. There are also people who I think have bought into the idea that Social Security is going to somehow go poof and be gone. And they're thinking, I got to get it while it's here. I think if that's the motivation, then they should come to the Money series and hear a little bit more about the sustainability of Social Security, because it's very sustainable and it's committed to by our politicians, and our politicians are beholden to the voters who absolutely require that it continues. So it has a nice positive feedback loop that I think we can all agree on. In fact, I can guarantee you if any of the politicians talk about cutting Social Security benefits this year for the presidency, they will lose. And sometimes they slip up and actually say it. It's pretty bad in the world of videotapes because they just get played back over and over and over. They will lose. But then you can see that age 63, a very small number. 64, a small number starts. 65, then all of a sudden there's this pop at age 66. And again, that's a group of people who see age 66 as my full retirement age. They've kind of bought into the idea that that's they're supposed to do because someone called it full retirement, so now they should retire. And then you can see this group of people from 67 to 69, age 70. It's a very small, rarefied air. But there are people who can afford to delay, and there are many benefits to being able to delay. There are many benefits not only from the increase that they get, but there are benefits in terms of their tax planning. In fact, I wrote a couple articles in the last month that were very much about taking advantage of this opportunity to delay your Social Security from a tax perspective. And again, I think I'm talking to a small group of people, but I guess it's on my mind, and so I'm talking about it. But this is an interesting graphic showing you how skewed it is to taking it as early as humanly possible. So let's talk about the basic analysis and math that you have to think about when you delay and get paid more. And I want you to kind of imagine it as an investment. So when I can collect something at age 62, I'm allowed to, I'm eligible, I could go in and file and I could start getting a check, and I choose not to, I have to get something in return for that. And what they've told me is I get an 8% higher benefit if I wait a whole year. So if I forego benefits for 12 straight months, and then I go back in, they'll give me that benefit plus an 8% increase. So that investment has to pay off. And I can tell you that essentially what it is that if you go at age 62, by the time you get out to your early 80s, if you delay it a year, a 2, 3, 4, and you delay it all the way to age 66, by about 81, 82, that time frame is about the point where you've now collected enough extra in your payments to have recouped your foregone benefits for that year or 2 or 3 or 4. So it's very much a mortality bet. When you say I want to delay, you have to think about how long am I going to live and collect that higher benefit before I'm ahead of the game, before I'm in the black. And the answer, just so you know, is a rough number of about 14 years. So think about it as being somewhere around your early 80s, very early 80s. If you live that long, you've won the bet with the government. It was better to delay and get a higher benefit going forward. Is that clear? Around the early 80s. But I don't want you, if you're married, to think selfishly. Well, first off, you're married, so don't think selfishly, and that's the first thing. I'm reminded of that often. I'll cut that out of the video so that my wife doesn't see it. Like as if she watches this, she does not. So what I can say is that the selfish aspect of that is I don't want you to be selfish, because what really matters, and as you'll see, if you're married and your spouse waited and got this increased benefit, if you die first, your spouse gets to step into that higher benefit for the rest of their life. They get to keep that benefit. So it isn't just your life expectancy that matters. It's the joint life expectancy of you and your spouse. It's that combined life expectancy. It's a joint mortality calculation. So you may not be confident that you'll live 14 years, but your spouse has longevity in their genes. Delaying, if you're the high earner, delaying and getting more is going to benefit your surviving spouse. And it's a pretty good bet. 8% increase, recouping that give up of benefits during that time, early 80s. And I can just tell you the math is pretty strong in favor of delaying, if you can. But you have to have other resources. You either have to keep working, and I tend to always encourage working for lots of reasons. Money, one, but there's a lot of other great reasons to keep working. But not everyone has that option, and nor do they have that desire. Number 2 is you have to have other resources to pull from, either a pension, rental real estate, investments from your taxable accounts, pulling money off of your IRA. There's many, those savings pools that you can pull from. Those are other options for delaying. But if you don't have a lot of that, then Social Security becomes that default option, and you won't delay. But if you have them, delaying can be a wonderful thing. And I think you'll be able to make it to 80, 81, 82 and have that bet pay off. There's probably a point where you're about 81 and you realize, wow, I just beat the government. You probably get really happy for a few years at least. It's time to celebrate, exactly. It's like paying off the mortgage. So I want to point out actually up on this slide, up at the top, there's a 50% chance that one spouse is going to live to age 92. So that gives you the idea of that joint mortality issue. Half of all couples have at least one spouse live to 92. A quarter of them have someone living to age 97. I find those actually astounding. I've never verified it, but it kind of gives you the idea that you can't think about just your own mortality when you make this decision. So beyond the benefit that you get just by working, so your own work history has entitled you to a benefit. So we talked about those 35 years, it averages them out, and it gives you a benefit amount, a benefit calculation based off of those average of 35 years. There are other benefits within the system of Social Security. And one of them happens to be spousal benefits for people who've been married. And this means that if you have a spouse who did not work outside the home or worked minimally outside the home, and their own work history just simply didn't add up to much, they're entitled to half of your benefit as a married spouse. So this was designed obviously for, families from long ago, increasingly rare family where you have someone staying home, raising the kids, taking care of life outside of the work world, and one spouse out there earning a living. I don't know the statistics nowadays, I just know the anecdotal feel, and it's becoming rarer and rarer. But the system was designed to benefit that construct, that familial construct of having a one breadwinner and a stay-at-home spouse. And they were entitled to half of the spousal benefit, half of their spousal benefit, which means that if you think about it, one might be getting $2,500 a month. The stay-at-home spouse didn't work practically at all outside the home. They're going to be getting something in the range of $1,250 a month, bringing the total to $3,750 a month. When the primary, the higher earning, the higher benefit spouse dies, if they die first, that spousal benefit falls away, and they step into and keep the higher benefit. Okay? And the way that you get entitled to this is that you're married for a year. You're still married, because then it's considered a spousal benefit. And the only way to get it is if your spouse is also filed for Social Security. So you're not going to get a spousal benefit if your spouse continues to delay and delay and delay and delay. You're also not going to get spousal benefits. I will also tell you that delay for your own benefit can go all the way to age 70, but you're not going to get any more spousal benefit after the age of 66. It stops growing at that point. So there is some complex math that some people need to do to say, I'm going to keep delaying. My spouse is also giving up benefits because they're not going to get spousal benefits if I haven't filed yet. And this brings me to the law change back in November of 2015. There used to be a trick, and the trick was if your spouse could file for benefits and then suspend their filing, and that would allow you to then collect your own 50% benefit as the married spouse. It was called the file and suspend method. And it went on for years, and you can imagine, who does this benefit? Who is this designed for to take advantage of it? Well, those who can continue to delay collecting Social Security because they have other means, or they have a job that allows them to work until age 70 because they're sitting behind a computer all day long. So I would have to say it's people who have higher incomes, pretty well to do, and this was a way for them to eke out additional benefits out of the Social Security system. So Congress essentially in the middle of the night, literally, in November of 2015 said, we're done with the file and suspend trick. They called it a loophole. It's not really a loophole, it's just sitting right there. And so they gave people 6 months to do it, after which they just ended it. So when I gave my first talk on Social Security, I wanted to highlight, because it's my job to try to find benefits for people. And I said, I want to highlight the 6-month window that you may want to do a file and suspend maneuver so that your spouse can collect spousal benefits for the rest of time, and then you'll turn your benefit back on again. That's now gone. So anyway, being married, there are benefits beyond just your own work record. Now you're a married spouse, you get half of your spouse's benefit. Additionally, there are benefits for people who've been divorced. The way you qualify for this is that you were married for 10 years. Your spouse, in this case, for you to file for these divorce benefits, you don't have to coordinate with your ex-spouse. You don't have to beg them to file in order for you to file. So they took away that requirement, which I think is pretty logical when you think about it. The last thing you want to do is give your ex-spouse any additional leverage. So at age 62, you can file for this benefit, whether your spouse is filed or not. And interestingly, you can continue to marry and divorce and start collecting ex-spouses throughout your entire life. And then you can choose whichever benefit is best for you. So this encourages, who is the movie star that got married like 17 times or something? Elizabeth Taylor. So this is the Elizabeth Taylor method. Just keep getting married, last 10 years and a day, collect the divorce benefit. But this is a benefit, again, that allows you to have 50%. And there's logic behind this. I mean, if you, again, were someone who stayed at home or supporting someone's career, they run off with the secretary after 10 years in the day. The system is designed to make sure that doesn't detrimentally affect the stay-at-home spouse, okay? These all feel like 1950s kind of rules, but this is what they are. And then the next benefit beyond your own work history, beyond being married, beyond getting divorced, is that if your spouse dies, you're entitled to benefits as well. And this one's a little more complex. I talked about the step up. So that's the basic situation. You're married to someone for a while. You're collecting spousal benefit potentially. They're collecting their benefit. They die. Your benefit goes away, and you step into the spouse's benefit. You need to be married for. Married for 10 years. I have the wrong icon in there. Married for 10 years. I'm sorry. You need to have worked for 10 years. You need to have been married for 9 months. So it's an interesting window there. 9 months counts. Why they came up with 9 months, I don't know. But I do know that they wanted it to be shorter than 10 years because you don't really get to choose when your spouse is going to die. Maybe they thought 9 months was far enough out in the future that you weren't planning for their demise. But I'm not really sure why 9 months is the chosen number. And lastly, in this case, if you're a widow or a widower, you can file for benefits, these specific benefits, as early as age 60. So everything up until this point that I've talked about was age 62 was the earliest, except for the circumstance where you've lost a spouse. You can go as early as age 60. It's reduced, just like we are reducing down to 62. There's further reduction down to age 60. But when you file for those benefits, for the widow benefits, you want to make sure to analyze it closely and file potentially what's called a restricted application. And you're essentially walking into Social Security and you're saying, I want benefits, but I don't want my own work history. I've been working, I'm accumulating benefits. I don't want to collect mine. I want to make sure that I'm only collecting my deceased spouse's benefit. You restrict the application to that. What that allows you to do, potentially if the math is right, that you'll collect the spouse's benefit as early as age 60 and continue to let your benefit grow and grow and grow and grow and grow at 8% per year all the way to age 70. Or at any point along the way, you then switch. You then shut off the widow's benefit or the widower benefit, and you move into your own work benefit. And I can tell you I've got multiple clients where that's exactly what they're on. They've done the math and said I can collect this spousal benefit at a lower level, and let my own benefit continue to grow and grow and grow and grow all the way to age 70. And that's a more optimal solution, potentially, depending on your work record. It may be that your work history is pretty low, your deceased spouse's is higher, and in that case, you may want to collect as early as age 62 and have that be a restricted application, just your own work benefit, and then you let your spousal, but your deceased spouse's benefit grow and grow and grow all the way to age 66. That's as high as it can grow as age 66, and then you switch over to that one. So you have to do the math on who had what relative earnings to figure out what the most optimal thing is. The last thing you do is just go in at age 62 and say, I want to file for benefits, because they're going to give you whichever is higher at that moment, and then you're stuck. It wasn't the optimal decision. You want to make sure that you do the calculation and restrict that application to the most optimal scenario. Okay? So I'm going to talk now about a couple of techniques, a couple of things to keep in mind. And the first thing is I want everyone to recognize, and I think you pretty much know, that there are effects when you're actually working while collecting benefits before your full retirement age. So I said that full retirement age of 66 was sort of an arbitrary figure that we kind of used to figure out what kind of a decrease is there versus what kind of an increase is there, and it's really doesn't mean anything. It means something when it comes to working. Collecting Social Security while you're working before your full retirement age can impact how much of the benefit you actually get to keep. And so the rule is you can make as much as $18,000 a year, changes every single year, goes up with inflation. And any dollars you make above that can cause a reduction in your benefit, and they simply take it back. And the calculation is for every $2 above the limit, they'll take away $1 of your benefit. So the math on it can become quite onerous. If you have a full-time job, you're making $50,000. They look at $50,000, compare it to 18. They see, $30,000 worth of extra money. That's $15,000 of benefits they'll take back. That might be all of your Social Security at that point. So you're better off not having filed at all. The first year has a different rule, and basically all that's saying is if you're going to hit your full retirement age that year, you can make up to $50,000 that year without having that reduction take place. So they give you a little bit of a break during that year. And then after the full retirement age, you can continue to work and collect all your benefit, and they don't take any of it back. They tax it, which is what I'm going to talk about next, is the taxation of Social Security. So this is a little bit of a complex slide, but I think it's important for you to understand how the government calculates how much of your Social Security is going to get taxed. So I mentioned Alan Greenspan back in 1983. They increased the retirement age. They increased how much of your paycheck is going to go to Social Security. But they also introduced this concept that I'm sure was controversial, but I was 11 years old, so I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. They started to tax part of your Social Security benefit for the first time. Think about that for just a moment. They asked you to put money into the Social Security system. You paid tax on that income. And then you're going to get a benefit in the future, and it was supposed to come out not getting taxed because you'd already been taxed on that. And they've introduced this idea of, no, we're going to tax it on the way in and we're going to tax it on the way out if you make too much money. This is a way of just simply trying to find revenue to shore up the system. And so the calculation's a bit complex, but it has some logic behind it. So I've painted a picture. First off, the icons are a single person. There are 3 different brackets of income. And for a married couple, there are 3 different brackets of income upon which we do this calculation. So I'm highlighting in this example that married couple, the guy with the really cool beard. I don't know why I picked that one, but the beard. Okay. So the guy with the beard and his wife, that's who I'm focused on right now. And I'm going to go through a calculation, 2 of them, and I'm going to show you how it was calculated, how much tax, how much of your Social Security will be counted as taxable income. They're married and they have $60,000 of what's called provisional income. I'm not going to go into the calculation of what provisional income is, but I'm going to just tell you what it is, kind of. It's all of your income plus half of your Social Security. That's provisional income. So basically everything that you count on your tax return plus half of your Social Security. Why half? Because I presume they think, well, that's the half you put in, so that's the half the employer put in, so we'll count it. Even though really it's all your money. So married couple with $60,000 of provisional income, of which they have Social Security that was $30,000. Okay? So $30,000 Social Security, their provisional income that included half of that Social Security plus everything else is $60,000. The government says that, okay, the first $32,000 of your provisional income, we're not going to create any kind of taxation of Social Security on that. So if that's all the provisional income you have, don't worry about it. Nothing of Social Security will get taxed. That's not that high, but that's how that works. So none of it will get taxed at that point. But the next $12,000 of your income, of your provisional income, $32,000 to $44,000, they're going to look at that and they're going to go, how much do you have of that used up? Well, in this example, $60,000 is 32 plus 12 more. They get 50% of that $12,000, creates $6,000 of your Social Security will get taxed. Of the $30,000, so far we're at $6,000 of it's going to get taxed. But this couple has even more income. They're in that third bracket. And you see the third bracket's an unending bracket. It's more than $44,000. Well, they had 60 of provisional income. That's another $16,000 because that's how you add up 32 plus 12 plus 16 is 60,000. 85% of that chunk is going to translate into Social Security being taxed, which is another $13,600. When you add up 0 plus 6,000 plus 13,600, it turns out that $19,600 of the $30,000 of Social Security is going to count as taxable income. So when you look on your tax return, how many here have actually are already collecting Social Security? Anybody? Yeah. So if you look at your tax return, you're going to see that that number might be as high as 85% of your Social Security is taxed. It could be as low as 0, or it could be somewhere in between. As you have other income, that number will rise, potentially. As you have less income, that number will be lower. So you can see certain things can happen. Imagine if I'm collecting Social Security and I decide that we need to re-roof the house, and you look at all your investment accounts and you say, well, we need the money from somewhere, and you call your investment advisor, your broker, whatever, and you pull money out of your IRA to pay for that re-roofing of the house. And you think, well, I'm in the 12% bracket, so I know what I'm supposed to withhold. I'm supposed to withhold 12% of what I'm taking out. Seems low. Taxes were cut down to 12%. I'm feeling pretty good about that. So I'll take it out of my IRA. If you take it out of your IRA, it can have the effect of increasing your provisional income. You all follow that. It increases your income. And then the whack-a-mole starts. It increases your Social Security's tax as well. So now you have a double whammy. And I wrote an article on it called Whack-a-Mole. And it basically means you hit one thing, it pops another thing up. And the next thing you know, you're paying taxes at about 22.2%, not at 12. So you're underpaying your taxes, you get a big surprise, you have a big conversation at home with your spouse. Why did you take it out of the IRA? Why didn't you take it out of that savings account that we have? Why didn't you borrow it against the house? There are a lot of other things you may have done that were smarter tax-wise than taking it out of the IRA. And it all has to do with the way Social Security gets taxed. This is also potentially another reason that you may want to consider delaying Social Security to allow you to do some smart tax things. It keeps your Social Security out of the equation, and you might then be able to do Roth conversions without having Social Security get taxed at a higher level. You might be able to take capital gains without having to pay tax on your Social Security. So in other words, you get rid of the whack-a-mole for a period of years. They're called the gap years. And they're the gap years of planning of how to beat the tax system. And getting Social Security off the equation, out of the equation, allows you to plan for those things. Not everyone can do it. But if you can, you want to do gap year analysis. Can I wait? And if I wait, not only do I get 8% more, but now I can do some tax things that aren't going to hurt me later on in life. So let me show you an example where we're switching it to a married couple that's earning a little bit less. Now it's $40,000 of provisional income. Social Security was $20,000 of that. If you do the math on that couple, the first $32,000, there's nothing affecting Social Security taxation. They then are within a 12% group. $12,000 then is used up, half of which creates a $4,000 chunk of your Social Security is taxed. You can see that this couple is only having 20% of their income, of their Social Security income taxed. This one was 65, this one's 20. So as I said, you could have a situation where you have none of it. And I wouldn't say that that's the greatest situation in the world. It just means you don't have much income. So, don't wish for that, okay? But you can have as much as 85%, and you can game the system in between by making sure that you know what you're pulling money from and how it's affecting your taxes, because it can affect Social Security. So I'm going to go through one last tax trick. I've got a few more minutes here, and then we'll go into Q&A. This is something that I always bring up because I think that most people they're not as aware of it as they should be. And it happens really later in life for when you hit the age of 70 and a half with IRA money. The tax law was changed 2 years ago, really starting in 2018, where the standard deduction doubled. And because of that, most people don't itemize on their tax return anymore. It's something like 10% of people. It used to be a third of all taxpayers itemized, counting up all your deductible expenses. Now you just get a blanket standard deduction, and it's bigger than all the little property taxes and donations and all of that stuff. So there is a way for you. So think about what happens when you write a check to a charity out of your checkbook, and it's not, and you have a standard deduction that's bigger than any of your itemized deductions. You're not getting any tax deduction on it at all, because you're still getting the standard deduction, so you don't get any benefit from it. At the age of 70 and a half, you can write checks directly to charitable organizations out of your IRA, and it counts as part of your required distribution, so you can subtract it from your required distribution, and it doesn't count as income to you. So think about giving a donation without having to pay from money that's never been taxed, giving it to a charity, and the government doesn't count that as income against you. It's like a deduction. That's what you get. So I want to kind of show you the impact of this with Social Security taxation. So this guy here, really fast, he's over the age of 70 and a half. And by the way, they're called Qualified Charitable Distributions from your IRA, QCDs. You only can do them after the age of 70 and a half. So a lot of you are a lot younger than that, but just keep it in mind. If the tax law is the way it is in the future, at age 70 and a half is when you want to turn on this idea in your head, that you want to make qualified charitable distributions from your IRA, not just from your checkbook. This guy here, before he figures out what to do the better way, he has a bunch of income worth $20,000. He has a required distribution of $12,000. So the government's telling him you have to take out $12,000 out of your IRA. That's required for him. And he has $20,000 of Social Security. And if you do the math on that and do all that provisional income thing that I talked about, it turns out that 56% of his Social Security is going to get taxed. We just went through how that happens. He then looks at his whole situation. He says, well, I have itemized deductions that are $11,050. There's a reason I picked that number. And I have other, those are all of my itemized deductions except for my charitable donations. And I went into my checkbook and I added those all up, my regular old checkbook. And I gave $3,000 away and I had $14,050 worth of deductions. And if you do his calculation on his tax, it's $3,313 to the federal government. This $14,050 happens to be the standard deduction for this age 70 and a half guy. He just happened to have itemized deductions plus his donations added up to the same number, okay? I made it coincidental. But you see, he did an RMD of $12,000, and he gave away $3,000 from his regular old checkbook, not from his IRA. That's the tax he paid. If he had just done one thing differently, he could have saved $666. It's the worst number in the world, but I picked 666. Same income. Notice that the combination of charitable giving out of his IRA and his leftover required distribution of $9,000 adds up to that same $12,000. Do you see that? Social Security is exactly the same, but because that charitable giving made it so he had less coming out of his IRA that was considered taxable, guess what? He has less money. 44% of his Social Security is now being taxed. So not only does he have less money being taxed out of his IRA, now he's having less money taxed out of his Social Security. The bottom line is he has a standard deduction anyway of $14,050, the same as before. He didn't give up anything. Calculation is that he only has to pay $2,647, and he ends up with a $666 tax break just by writing a check from his IRA. And it affected not only that income, but also his Social Security. So there are definitely things that you need to learn or keep in mind when you're making those donations after the age of 70 and a half when you're dealing with Social Security. And that, no, it's not if you're single. I gave an example of single because about 3 years ago, I was criticized that almost every one of my examples were married couples. And someone said, I just want you to know, not everybody's married. So now, I do that. So there were married examples and now single examples. So yes, married, it's exactly the same math. It's just the standard deductions doubled. And the calculation of how much of your Social Security tax is a little bit different, which we saw. So with that, I first want to thank multiple entities here. First off, the Senior Center Network for being such a wonderful venue and a great set of programming for lots and lots of people. I'm a huge fan of the Senior Center, and that's not because my mom was on an advisory board for like my whole life, which I really respect the time she spent on that. Tattle, of course, for having such a great venue for this and being a great community center. Leland Township Library, you should go out there. It's probably the most beautiful library on the river that you'll ever see in your life. And also Traverse Area Community Media, which is actually recording this tonight. Being able to have this go out in the airwaves and all the programming that's on that station, check it out. Channel 189, you can go online and watch stuff too. So with that, I will now move to Q&A and start answering as many questions as possible.